So I'm in the forest and there's something that I feel on my heart to share, and that is a paper that I wrote about time 15 years ago. And I'm going to do just a girl sitting under a tree, reading a book, asking it to love her today, reading something that I wrote. Yeah? Someone has something to say about that. And I'm excited for the medieval fair, so can you tell? I'm getting excited about the medieval fair coming up on the 14th, 15th in Coombs. So the paper that I wrote is on time and time perception. And I wrote it 15 years ago and I was very proud of it. I handed it in actually as an assignment for my master's degree. And although I usually do pretty good on papers, this one I failed, and I'm not going to dwell on that, is what I'm trying to say. I have it very strongly, something very clearly told me from a very cosmic source saying, you have to put this out in the world now. Now is the time. The world's ready for it now. So it will reach the right people. It will activate the right hearts. And it doesn't matter about how it was perceived in the past. Actually, it's a little bit funny because it's about time. And so the past, present, future, all irrelevant. But that being said, as confusing as time is, I feel it's the right time to share this, and that there's a reason I feel it on my heart to share this paper. So I'm going to find my tree and I shall read you this paper that I wrote about time perception in correlation to multi-party conflict management. So it's about mediating between groups of people, because there isn't a lot written on time, mental time perception with theory in this field yet. So I found my tree, and even though I am completely in the forest and up a hill, down a path, around a corner, through the woods, the fall fair in my hometown is set up, and it's amazing how sound travels in a valley. So you're going to hear the festivities of my town that I live in and the excitement of the fall fair echoing through the trees. So I think everybody should bring a cape with them everywhere because now I have something beautiful to sit on. And if you're not familiar with just a girl sitting under a tree reading a book, asking it to love her, and yes, I took that from a spin-off of Julia Roberts in Notting Hill. Is that the name of the movie? I'm going to read something today. Usually I read from a book and I show the book and pick a section of it. Today I'm going to read something that I wrote, and it's called System of Time. And I'll just get into it. I'm trying to show how time perception has such a profound effect on multi-party dynamics and communication between people. And so I'm taking theory that is already written about both time and mental and time perception, and even the definitions of time in the English language. I'm also taking theories out there already to do with mediation, and I'm blending it together to present how important time perception is and how it is something that this field of study, conflict facilitation, would benefit from taking into account people's mental time perception. So I'll get into it. It's 8 pages long and I shall read it. I'll just set up my camera. Time as a System by me, Ashley Zelinsky. This paper serves to identify the system of time and the part one plays with it as a human being. This reflection aims to discuss the system of time's very existence based on its correlation to us as it has been mathematically explained not to exist independently. This reflection, at best, is a discourse foundationally based on a partial and temporary view, capturing a perspective of the world in which I live, a perspective constructed around how I register my connection with time. This paper uses the lenses of complexity theory when analyzing mental time system. This adopts the knowledge that every view is temporary and partial, so time, like knowledge, is local to us. Local in terms of the issues we are involved in, and local even in terms of periods of time. At first, this seems quite frustrating, admitting that nothing is absolute and that no questions can expect absolute answers, specifically with something as personal and integral as the concept of time. Yet it is also dually liberating, while recognizing who or what is inside our boundaries of thinking and who will benefit, and who is outside and thus not. One is free within their curiosity-spirited quest from the impossible added pressure of explaining any absolute answers. For this reason, that it be necessary to point out that this paper is most interested in one's perception of time system. Thus, it may actually be more accurate to be referring as a mental time system instead of a system of time. A functionalist view of time system's purpose may be that it is to prevent everything from happening at once. I currently see it as providing structure, a template for events. I found that there are 17 variant definitions of time in the Canadian Oxford Dictionary. The primary one, written out as the indefinite and continuous duration of existence, seen as a series of events progressing from past to the future. A thorough search on a journal database did not yield any results on identifying works written about time as a system. What is available to sift through is a wide array of articles consisting of mathematical equations arguing over what can and cannot be measured in relation to the concept of time. Unless one is fairly mathematically versed, they prove difficult at best to decipher, yet the majority still contain a conclusion of sorts written out in simpler terms. The majority of these support the premise that time is in fact quite possibly a mental perception, a partial view of an absolute reality. A fundamental example of this supposition laid out the groundwork for future quests on the subject of time is the following thesis written by Newton. And here I quote and source. Absolute time, space, motion, rest belong only to these bodies that change under the influence of some external force in different ways, whereas all others' bodies change is under this force in one and in a similar way. We can indicate those bodies as some bodies with its own behavior. Only such bodies possess true time, which goes on its own nature and does not depend on anything external. For other things, time runs relatively, so that we can only approximately measure its trace. Hence, we should regard it variable t in the equations of the motion as some artifact relative to all things that submit to the law of gravitation. And that I sourced. Moving along. In the last half of a century, the developmental geochronology, which is interested in the age of the Earth, lead to an examination of microbiology, which bases a notion around the cause of time as a forerunner to the study of man's consciousness around time. And here I quote again. The notion of that cause of time has helped to understand that biological process of living cell division is a single process in the formation of spatial temporal properties in the world. The cell fission, and fission is spelled Fission, I just don't know how to pronounce that, is a bearer of all signs of time. Indivisible cells have brought about a sense of time or the internal rhythm of living organism. Evolution of human brain has led to the origination of consciousness of time in man. Moving along. Every field has outlined its own definition of a system. A popular observation considered a foremost exponent of systems philosophy and general evolution theory is Ervin Laszlo's 4 propositions on systems. Unless we want to delve into a bottomless philosophical dialogue, it makes good sense to deem the following 4 propositions he outlines in his books, the systems of worldview, irrelevant in discussion to time as a system. So this is the propositions. Proposition 1, natural systems are wholes with irreducible properties. Proposition 2, natural systems maintain themselves in a changing environment. Proposition 3, natural systems create themselves in response to self-creativity on other systems. Proposition 4, natural systems are coordinating interfaces in nature's holarchy. And then I source these 4 propositions. And I explain here my thought on why these propositions are irrelevant in discussion as time as a system. This is in part due to the fact that Laszlo is not incorporating the constructed perception of time system into his thread of thought, and that his propositions, particularly proposition 2, 3, and 4, are interlaced with unfounded assumption of systems in general. This paper will not delve deeper into this here, as such dialogue would steer us off in another direction. However, Laszlo does abstractly touch on space-time in relation to a discussion of our cosmic origins. So this is where I do want to focus on his theory. He writes, imagine a universe made up not of things in space and in time, but in pattern flows extending throughout its reaches. What flows is a mysterious, non-individualized something we call energy. It flows along pathways structured by metric integral space-time. And I quote that. Under the discussion, Laszlo entitled Cosmic Origins, he acquits the integral nature of space-time to be responsible for providing structure, rather than perception of man creating the configuration of time system. Jeffrey Vickers' definition of open system has a better fit for identifying time as a system. He writes, form is more enduring than the presence of substances which constitute it at some moment of time. Time as a system, constructed upon perception as an open system, rings true to the tune of this definition. Imagine time, or at least the perception of it, continues, is enduring, while substance and its form are present at certain moments of time. This can get mathematical. However, if we view space and time as linked, as Einstein says they are, they would present the form, which is viewed as infinite. It is the substance of this structure we create with our consciousness of time. Vickers also writes, systems are nets of relations which are sustained through time, and emphasizes the key importance of relationships between people as a way of understanding systems. A supplemental addendum to this discussion, and dually a key leverage point toward an improvement in communication with those around us, depends on our ability to tap into an ongoing awareness of where those around us are in time and their perception of time as a system, and their associated values in connection to that consciousness. Vickers emphasizes the key importance of relationships between people as a way of understanding systems. If systems are nets of relations which are sustained through time, as Jeffrey Vickers suggests, and time perception affects everyone in which we have a relationship with in this lifetime, then one can see the integral necessity for a spotlighted study around perception of time system in this field of study. There's currently not a lot, if any, dialogue or theory presented in time in regards to, let me start that over. There is currently not a lot, if any, dialogue or theory presented in regards in integrated perceptions of time system in the spectrum of conflict mediation studies. Expanding time may also be an awareness that one's perception of time system may be limiting. Jeffrey Vickers calls attention to what he coins man trap. A trap is a trap only for the creatures which cannot solve the problem it sets. Man traps are dangerous only in relation to the limitations of what men can see and value and do. If we position our hypothesis based on the stance that evolution of the brain has led to the origination consciousness of time in man, then human, under the definition of consciousness, includes of having a sense perception in reference to awareness of self. If we use the tools of critical thinking theory, as Brian suggests, then just by sole conviction of having a perception, we admit we own only one spotlighted view of the time system and our perception to it. Good leverage point towards seeing a larger spotlighted understanding of time will plausibly be to identify some of these man traps. One limitation in our current perception around, I think I meant to write the word time in there, around time, regards to a more holistic view may plausibly lay in part in how we currently measure time. The following are some possible man traps of limited sight toward our perception of the system of time. One of these plausible man traps may be in our tools of measuring time. Currently, we are using what is referred to as a Gregorian calendar. Efforts are frequently made to eliminate the defects of the Gregorian calendar and establish fixed dates for all festivals and days of rest. Two major revisions, the International Fixed Calendar and the World Calendar, have been presented for consideration. But besides these new systems, the Gregorian calendar still holds sway. A good leverage point includes the following adage is to mediate on an old adage that we have only now. All any of us can do is examine our actions each day, live the day as fully as we can, and to plan and hope for the positive and productive future to the best of our ability. We can't wash tomorrow's dirty dishes today, but we can plan the meals. That's a famous quote. This goes along the lines of life may deal you the cards, but you still play them. One of my favorite sociological lines. Another man trap preventing us to see other perceptions around time may be the structure of language. Words can be very limiting and don't often express well what we are trying to say. Our syntax may be a limitation. Sorry, my battery, it says, do you want, how many more pages? We'll see if we can make it. I'll turn down my, there we go. That might save me some time. I turned down my light. Another man trap preventing us to see other perceptions around time may be the structure of language. Words can be very limiting and often don't express well what we are trying to say. Our syntax may be a limitation to new ways to communicate about time. For example, we call a cat a cat. The cat is not really the word cat. It is something else. It's just as time is something much different from any syntax we can apply. Dialogues about syntax argue that there is a pattern to language and identifies the order in which strings or chains or chunks of language appear. For example, the following text is an example of right branching. Here, modification follows the close proximity to what it modifies, a new chunk suspended from the previous one. Back in time. Which time? A time made simple. Made simple how? Made simple by the loss. What kind of loss? Burned and dissolved, broken off. How broken off? Like a graveyard marble sculpture in the weather. Some higher yogis devote life to meditating away from language to detach from this evolved consciousness of man, in attempt to aligning themselves back in touch with the internal rhythm and the vibrations on a cellular level. They may sit in the same posture and chant, use ice water or silence the verbal mind from syntax. I need to rework some of these sentences, but you're getting the vibe. Some people choose to drop acid or do mushrooms, which bypasses the liver and goes straight to the brain as an example to shortcut past this evolved consciousness of man, which this perception of time as a circuit can be warped or manipulated. It has been reported that through meditation or dropping acid, mushrooms, etc., one can achieve these alterations into different pathways of thought, able to exist without time for a short while, but that you'll burn your eggs if you do that. And here I'm quoting something here. I have all my sources at the end, so I don't know where I'm quoting from right exactly in this spot. As we think about the worlds that may one day become thinkable, sayable, legible, the opening up of the foreclosed and the saying of the unspeakable become part of the offense that must be committed in order to expand the domain of linguistic survival. That's from a book called Excitable Speech, A Politics of the Performative by Jay Butler. Perhaps the leverage point here is the re-signifying of the speech around time to open up new contexts. This might include speaking in ways that have not yet been legitimated or normalized when talking about one's perception of themselves in relation to time. This may especially ring true under the spectrum of conflict mediation studies, where there is currently not a lot, if any, dialogue or theory presented in regards to integrating perceptions of time system. Final words. If systems are nets of relations which are sustained through time, as Jeffrey Vickers suggests, and time perception affects everyone in which we have a relationship with in this lifetime, then one can see the integral necessity for a spotlighted study around the perception of time system in this field of study, mediation. Lewin did touch on this with his argument. Time perspective plays an important part in the actions of people. He writes, actions, emotions, and certainly the morale of an individual at any instant depends upon this total time perspective. Conflict is thought of as a historical process and focused on the past. People in conflict have past orientation and are often concerned with past injustices or events that led to present-day conditions. Not surprisingly then, conflict resolution is concerned or building capacity for being able to talk about conflict, as I like to also word it. Not surprisingly then, conflict resolution is concerned with actions today that will lead to a positive future. If time runs relative to bodies on the course of their own nature, and if the evolution of human brain has led to the origination of consciousness of time in man, then conceivably conflict resolution should consider an alternative emphasis other than that based on positive future outcome, which has now been outlined as a conceptually developed illusion. Instead, the signs show it is wiser to include in such consideration that people within parties, within the bounds of overlapping systems, are at different times in their lives. One person's time might be going fast, another's slow. Time and its record keeping, syntax around its dialogue, are areas in which allowance, understanding, and respect for another viewpoint are still needed. And so I talked to an elder in my community about the institution I handed this into and, not doing well on this paper. And it was explained to me that sometimes, just like when you present certain ideas, the time has to be right. So I'm reading this and just presenting this idea that this idea that we are all on different times is going to really help us in building capacity to not run away from conflict, but have dialogue around conflict, and perhaps even see it as a way to have more pluralistic debates, and understanding that everyone has different time constructs happening will really help build that capacity and room for more growth between parties. Anyways, thank you for listening if you made it to the end, and that is my paper on time